And I am going into this assuming that if you've used Illustrator before, great. Hopefully I can cover something new you might have not seen before, or maybe you just have like a small previous experience. But if you are brand new, this is perfect because it's kind of going to be more of a get your bearings ready for the program so you can go to the library and use it yourself. Or if you have it already at home, this will kind of give you that overview for you guys to use. So I'm going to share my screen and walk you through the program. So when I open Illustrator, this is initially what you see, which is kind of a welcome page, and it's letting me choose where I want to go. So for me, because I use the program, I actually have some recent files like I can click on to open up. But then in this gray bar, it has some options for me that I can click and just kind of get started. You can see on the left-hand side, you can actually learn more, or I can find documents that have been shared with me that are in the cloud, or if I've previously deleted them, I can find them again through the trash. So typically I'll reopen a project I've already started. I can click open or just click on letter or any of the sizes I like. For now, I'm just going to click on a letter. Letter is a standard 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And this is great because with Adobe Illustrator, you're typically going to use the program for print or digital designs. And the best part about Adobe is that you can use either any size and you can change your artboards later. So now that you see this white sheet of paper on the screen, this is basically my canvas. This is my white sheet of paper I'm going to print on. And this gray area is the background. So there's a lot of tools you might be seeing on the left side, the right side, and on the top. So that's kind of something I want to go through and explain what these things are. So first, I'm going to start all the way at the top where it says Illustrator. So Illustrator is where you're going to get your basics, like what is it about and what are your preferences for the program. So everyone's going to start to have their own preferences as you get more comfortable using the program. And that's just where all of that's held. Like maybe you have different settings you want to play with, or different units if you want to work in inches, or if you want to work in pixels. These are places where you would change that. Then you have a whole bunch of options at the top bar, and you have these in most of your programs that you use, whether it's like Office or even just emails. So these are a lot of like more using once you get into a project, but you have a basic file and edit. Then you have something a little bit more object-based. So once you start playing with shapes and images, you're going to want to use this object drop-down menu to find more options for you to use. Then we have type. So again, that's going to be specifically only working with text, and we'll go over these a little bit more when we can. Selecting is going to be specific just for selecting tools or objects. Effect is going to add actual effects to any type of design. So this is going to be a little bit more advanced, but we might play with one of these options a little later. View has a whole bunch of different options of view modes, and these ones are really cool that I will go into a little bit right now. So one of the cool things, like you can do different overprint view, pixel preview, trim views. These are specifically if you are sending a file to print, you can actually view it in a specific ready mode, which is cool. Presentation mode, different screen modes. So right now we're in normal. If we did full screen mode, you would only see your canvas and you wouldn't see any of the tools. Zoom in and zoom out. So that's something obviously very important. I'm going to use my keyboard so you can zoom directly into your program, into your canvas, and you can zoom out and make things smaller. Fit the artboard in window. If you zoom out too far, you can bring it back in. Slices, we're not going to be working with today. And we're not going to be working with edges. So I'm going to keep going down a little bit to something called Smart Guides. Actually, I won't work with Smart Guides yet. I'm going to do grid. So go down Smart Guides, we really need a grid first. So I'm going to do show grid. And you can see I have now a hatch mark grid right over my artboard and the whole entire screen of Illustrator. So this is really useful if I want to make sure I stay within a certain like certain lines or certain elements, or I've taken some of those graphic design classes and know I want to have things very organized in a specific grid layout. This keeps it very linear for me to look at. And I'm going to put on my rulers here. So I just have my rulers now that pop up on the top and left-hand side. And if I want to drag out some lines, I just click and drag right over the ruler and pop a line out. And so that can really help me in my design process. So I'm going to undo those rulers, and I'm going to turn off the grid by just clicking Hide Grid. So even just under the view, there's so many different options for you on how you can view your canvas. And I'm going to turn off these rulers. Under Window, this is a lot of different control panels to enhance more of your design flow. So all of the windows from this drop-down menu actually appear on the right-hand side of your toolbar. So I'm actually going to expand these panels. And these are all different windows that you can find in this dropdown. So if I am looking for color, you can see that I have it check marked here because color is also on my right-hand side already open for me. But anything that is not check marked means that that window is not open. So if I want to open the stroke panel, I can click it and it'll pop up somewhere on my right-hand side controls. So here now we have a stroke panel. And you can also pull these things out. You can rearrange them all over your board. I like to keep it all, it kind of docks and it clicks into each other, kind of like a magnet. So you can just pull it in and you'll see how it turns blue. That means it's just docking and it's leaving it to the side and it doesn't have to be in your way when you're designing. So I like to keep my things over here to the side, and typically I like to keep it away from my screen so I have the most workspace possible. And that's especially true if you're working on a smaller computer or you're just working on a really big project. So I can actually collapse this by there's some little arrows to the side and it says collapse to icons. And now they're just kind of hidden away. So these windows on the side are all of the window options that you have in this drop-down menu. And then we have the classic help. So you can just type in a question if you're looking for stroke. Computer's a little slow. It's not good. You'll see that it starts to populate and you'll be able to highlight over any help. If you type in anything that you're looking for in the help bar, it'll auto-populate and it'll bring up all of the words that you highlight. And it'll indicate it right for you. So that's very helpful. So now we're going to talk about the left side toolbar. This toolbar is super important. This is like the main tools for you guys to use throughout any of your work. So instantly, anytime you start with Illustrator, the black arrow is already selected. The black arrow lets you select any part of a project, and you can just click and drag and see how I create this little dashed box that will let me select whatever I have on my blank page. Then I'm going to make a square for you guys. And show you that if I highlight, I'm going to click my black arrow and I can click this box and move it around. And now the other second best tool is the white arrow, and this is called the direct selection tool. Another thing to note is anything that you have in Illustrator, if you highlight over it without clicking, it's going to tell you the name of the tool right above it, in addition to a letter. That letter is the key command, the keyboard shortcut. And so that's very useful once you start to play with this a lot and you kind of just start to use your keyboard more than you use the toolbar by clicking around. So noticing that when you highlight over something, and it could be on the window side as well, that way you can find what you're looking for, or if you forget what it's called, you'll be able to see it right away. So with the white arrow, the direct selection tool, this lets you click more specifically to a point, so I can move points for a shape. Or if I have many different shapes on my screen, the black one, I can select all of these, especially if it's all contained into one big group. And I can't select only this tiny one that I want to click, but the white arrow will let me select just the tiny one. So that direct selection is actually being more focused on what it's selecting. So you kind of intertwine with both the white and the black arrow. And all of these tools, some of them you're going to see this little tiny, there's a little corner that means that there's more options or variations. So what you do is you click and hold it down, and more of those options are going to pop up underneath the tool. So we're going to talk about what some more of these tools are, but some of them we're going to skip because they're a little bit more advanced. The next big one is the pen tool. It's been highlighted over it, it says pen tool. What the pen tool does is exactly as it sounds. You basically get to draw your own shapes, and you can also draw curves. So it's really great with lines, but it's also very nice curves. So the pen tool is a very, very good friend in Illustrator. Then we have the text tool. So this is your classic just text tool. All you do with the text tool in Illustrator is you just click one dot, and it instantly types in lorem ipsum, which is a Latin language, and you can just start typing. Unlike other programs where you click and drag a box, you can still do that, but it changes what happens in Adobe Illustrator versus other programs. Typically, like what you're seeing on the screen is it is auto-populating that it wants to fill in this whole area with text. And that might not be what you need to do. But this is something that you can edit in your settings where it doesn't auto-populate with text, but initially this is what happens. So you don't really make text boxes in Illustrator. You can just click on the text tool and start typing. Then we have our shape tool. And this is something where you do want to hold it down and find your options because we want to play with the different shapes. So we have a rectangle. I'm going to hold it down. You can get a rounded rectangle. So the bigger it is right now, you can see those corners getting more rounded and more square, versus it can literally become a circle if it's too small. Then we just have the ellipse tool to make circles. We have a polygon tool. And while you have this tool on, there's a couple things to note. If I want to keep it a perfect shape, I hold down Shift on my keyboard. But another thing, I guess the polygon's a little hard to use. So if I want to make this perfect square, I hold down Shift. If I want to make more of this rectangle and make it super skinny, all I'm doing is holding down my left button on the mouse, and I can just click and drag whatever shape I'm looking for. But that perfect shape, I'm holding down Shift on my keyboard. And back to the polygon, this one is special because if I use the up arrow, while I'm making the shape, it adds more segments to my tool. And so I can create a different shape altogether. Or I can go back down and get my triangle. And the same rule goes for the star. So I can hold down Shift and have it be perfect. I can add more. I can get only a few and get my triangle back. So the shape tool makes it super fun.
We do have one question. Someone mentioned that they don't seem to have all of those options. How could they add them?
Are you holding down the shape to find more? If not, I will have to.
Where is, okay, which one did you pick, select for shapes? Because I know you said shapes and I'm like, I don't seem to have that.
It starts with the rectangle tool. It should be a
So when I have a rectangle one here, but it says gradient.
um does your if your toolbar is double like mine, it should be just a flat square, not a gradient square, so it should be higher up in your toolbar.
I have a double toolbar, but it doesn't have that many options. That's,
Okay.
I don't think I have the shapes tool.
So if that happens, in this toolbar, all the way at the bottom, there's these 3 dots.
Okay.
And these 3 dots indicate that some tools either may be missing or you can add them. So some of these you can see I have them all grayed out. But if they're white, you might need to add it. So I can find my rectangle tool and I can actually pull tools back into my toolbar if I didn't have anything. These are all grayed, so I can't pull anything out. But if you don't have any, if they're missing, they should be like an opaque white for you to pull into your toolbar.
Okay, so tool 1. Okay. Okay. It shows the star there, but it's weird. It's not. I'm like, I feel like I need to expand this or something. I don't know, like, because it shows that the polygon, ellipse, star, all that's over here, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I can I'll work with you afterwards. I can help you find that.
Okay.
But if that does happen, so you have the option to actually delete some of these tools if you never use them. I typically like to keep my toolbar pretty stacked, but sometimes that happens where tools kind of can disappear. Things have a mind of its own sometimes on computers. A few more tools I want to talk about are, bring those shapes back and talk about the shape builder tool. And what this tool does is combine shapes together. So if I have my 2 triangles, this shape builder tool has 2 little circles with an arrow next to it. And when you highlight over a shape that you've selected, and you know it's selected because it has a bounding box around it with these blue, I'm going to zoom in even more, but it has a whole bunch of blue squares and a blue line around it. I know that I am on this tool. If I use my shape builder tool, it has these like super tight hash marks over the shape, but you need to have more than one shape selected. What you can do is highlight over pieces of it and they turn into hash marks. And then with the shape builder, you just kind of draw on top of it and it combines your shape into one unit. So I'm going to make that a little bit more visible with changing the tone here so you guys can get a better view of that. So you can see I have 2 triangles and I want to keep this to be one shape. I'm going to take my shape builder tool, select both, and just highlight right over it. Alternatively, if I want to delete this middle part, I have a plus sign next to my arrow right now. But if I want to delete it, I just need to turn it into a minus. So I just click Option, and it'll delete that middle section, which is super easy way to build. It can like subtract shapes or unite shapes together. So that's a really fun thing to learn. So that's the shape builder tool. And I am going to open up a different file. And the last thing, I'm going to do this on here. I'm going to make a square, and all the way at the bottom, you guys can see that there's this tiny black square and a little white box with a red cross behind it. This is indicating my colors for the object I have, and this is for fill and stroke. So when I highlight over it, it says the top one is a fill and the bottom one is stroke. And I can actually click on that top stroke to change the color. There's this little arrow that lets me swap the options. And initially it always has the default, which gives me the white and black together. So white and black is always going to be your basic default, but you can change these. So if I want to change my stroke, I'm going to go into my window and I can pull up, I'm going to open these a little more. I have swatches already available. This color guide, I'm going to pull out and delete. Or I have color, so I can just use my eyedropper tool and pick that up. Now, this might be a little hard to see and might be a little tiny. So I'm going to make this stroke a little bigger. So there's a whole window that we pulled up earlier specifically for stroke. So the weight of it right now is a 1. I'm going to make it a 10. And you can see my stroke is blue. I can go over to my swatches and just pick any color. And I know it's going to change the stroke and not the interior fill color because what is in front on my palette here in my toolbar. But if I want to switch these options, I'm just going to actually switch it here. And you can notice that the same fill and stroke appear in your color palette and in your swatch bar in the corner. The white stroke is hard to see, so we can just make it a green. And that is it.
We did get one question. Someone asked, what exactly is a stroke?
The stroke is just the outline color of your object. So sometimes you might need it if you want to like make it more bold, or kind of what this may look like is more of that picture frame look where you kind of have that frame idea. So it can have a little bit more emphasis on your design, or it can outline something and be a little bit more, what's what I'm looking for? Just a little bit more bold. Sometimes you like highlight things, so you would put a stroke around it. So it's very good for framing. It's good in certain artwork. If you're making buildings, you might do just strokes around a building. So many ways to use strokes. But there's a ton of different options to play with. So while we're in here, I'll do it on this screen. So right now it's just a basic, like it's a really thick stroke. We have it at 10 point. Maybe we want to go back to 5. Maybe you can go down. Their minimum option available is a quarter point, but you can actually type in and make it up to 1, like 0.1 point, which is super tiny. You can barely even tell that that's on my screen. So it's fun to play with, but there's definitely more options than just a simple bold stroke. So in my window here, I can actually check mark dashed line and get my stroke to become dashed. So that might be useful if you're making like specific dash marks, or kind of in just a document and you just need a dashed line. That's where that comes into play. So even if we don't do it in a square, but we're just doing it on a shape, we can have just a simple dashed line. Make it a little tight. You can play with the gaps of it. So that's just a simple basic dashed line stroke. And if you want to make it a little bit more fancy, something that I haven't talked about yet is more of those profiles. So again, in this stroke window, there's a word that says profile. This lets me change what kind of like design I want to do. So maybe it's not just straight and black, but maybe it has some curvature to it. Maybe like one end is pointed and one end is not. And it kind of gives your product a little bit more interesting lines and more dynamic with what kind of profile your stroke may have. It could be rounded, so you can see like there's so many different options. And while we're in here as well, the arrowheads mean you can apply different, this is really large, I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller. You can apply different end caps to a line or a stroke. So that's something that's like, usually you don't need to do that. You can always draw an arrow later, but this is something where it's like, if you know you need to put an arrow somewhere, you can just draw a line and click on one of these arrow options, which is super cool. Okay. I'm going to get into a little bit more color. I'm going to do that next. So as you guys are making things, sometimes I know it's like, even for me, sometimes I get stuck on what colors I want to make things, or I don't know like what color palette might go together. But maybe you guys find reference images and you're like, I love this artwork, or this goes with my furniture in my bedroom, and you have a picture of it. You can drop in photos into Illustrator. So you can just go to File, Place your photo from wherever you have your picture. And now you have a picture set in your artboard. And I want to get these colors, I want to put them in my swatch panel. So that way I know I can play with these colors in my product, in like whatever I'm going to make next. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a square. I don't really want this to have this white fill and black stroke, because I don't want to play with stroke. I want just the solid color in this image. So I'm going to X the fill. So now you'll see a red line through it, but I want to swap it so the interior fill is black. So now there's no stroke, which is what I want. And now with my arrow, I want to make more of these squares. So I can just keep clicking and drawing my own square. And I'm hitting shift to make sure that I keep them perfect. I don't really have to. Another option is I can just click on one square, copy it. So that is edit copy, and then edit paste, and then just paste more of my squares back on my board. Or as you get more familiar with the program, you can start doing a little bit more key commands and make things go really fast. There's a key command that lets you paste right on top of another. So I just have a few boxes here, and I want to fill these in with the colors I see on this picture. So I'm going to click this first square, and now I need my eyedropper tool. So that looks exactly like a little dropper. And in order to get the color, I have to click shift on my keyboard and it picks it up for me. And then it instantly fills that square with that color. And for me to save it, I'm going to drop this down, fold these. I want to save this color and put it in this panel. I just kind of click and I can just drag it anywhere in here. And now I'll have this color saved for me. So if I want to do that with more colors, I'm going to click and get the yellow, get the orange, this really cool teal, and I think I need to get this darker indigo looking color. So now I have these cool colors from this picture, and then I just need to drag them all into my swatch panel. Doesn't really matter where they go. But now you don't need your picture in your program anymore, and you have this reference color palette to work with for whatever project you're going to use. So I know that can be really useful when it's like initially hard to find what kind of colors you want to use, and a good way to remember that like using imagery can help you build whatever project that may be. And we can play with these now, these new colors. So another fun tool I want to share is something from the effects panel. So I'm going to hide all of these. I'm assuming you can see a little bit more. So this has the same word written in a whole bunch of funky different ways. And it's super easy to do. There's an effect panel that lets you warp these together. And what's fun about this is, depending on what you want to make, this can be a really cool way to just add some like flair to a project. If you're making a greeting card, if you're just making some logos, this can be a really fun way to work with text. So it's like, how do you do this? So I'm going to type in a word. So let's type in, I'm going to type in the word clock, and I want to change, maybe I want to change the typeface. You can see that if I click it, now I'm selected on here, and I can change it right on top, or I have my text panel inside my docked control panel on the right hand side. So I have so many different fonts, but we can just choose something basic, and maybe instead of 12 point, I'm going to make it 42, just so you guys can see it a little better. So I have this selected, and I want to make it one of these cool shapes. So this is an effect, and we're going to warp it. Now, a whole bunch of these are really fun to play with, but we're only going to look at the warp tool right now. And I'm going to make it a bulge. And right now it's only at 11% bend, but if I make it even 100, you can see what happens to those letters and how it changes that effect. And now that I'm in this option panel, you can see here, I can actually click on the style and experiment and see which one I actually like. So it's a fun way. I'm going to make it a little less crazy. So now if you're actually wanting to play with it and you're not sure which one you want to use, this lets you kind of look around at the options before you have to commit. And what that means is like, okay, you're wanting to play with it, you're changing some options here with how much bend you want. Maybe it's horizontal, maybe it's not. Once you like it, you hit okay and it's locked. If you change your mind about something, you're always able to get it back, especially if you make duplicates of things. So what I like to tell people are that there's no reason not to have duplicates because all of your vectors are free. So I just like to copy and paste. Maybe I want to save that later. I don't want to forget how I did it. There's no reason not to have duplicates of things because it's free for your program. If I want to change this one though, because I might not like it, then, and you feel like you're kind of stuck, whenever you make any effects under these effects panel, under your window, we have appearances, which I have docked right here. It'll tell me what appearance I have on my object. So it says I have the lower arc, and it has this little effects icon. That means that there's an actual effect on this shape. So if I click on that arc, it brings back my options and I can actually go back and change it to something else. So it's okay to make up your mind if you're not sure about something, but it's also good to have duplicates of things in case you need to go back or just so you don't forget how you did it. So that's a little fun effects that you can play with. And you can see like all the cool things make it just, it's just fun. Play with your name, make a cool badge. All right. I want to talk a little bit more about the text tool and the difference between live text and outline text. So live text means if I click this, you can see that there is this blue line underneath the text. That means I can select and edit, delete it. I can edit text, live text. I can change it. I can change the font. I can change the size. So there's a whole bunch of things I can do because it's live. Now with outline text, I don't have that blue line exactly underneath. There's the bounding box, but I don't have a blue line. So this text is no longer editable with the text tool. So what that means is now I actually can play with it a little bit more. And so this is just reinforcing why you have the white and black arrow. Once you have an outline text, I can use this white arrow to actually play a little bit more specifically with my points. So with black text and with a black arrow and live text, I'm just going to move this around on my artboard. But with outline text and white arrows, I can click on points and move them around on my screen. So that makes it just a little bit more fun to use. And this is why and how you can change the different shapes of letters and just kind of make it more fun to use and make it a little bit more unique. That's a good question. How do you create the outline? So I will get there. So you cannot go back to live text once it's outlined. So that is why you make the duplicate. So if I want to play with, I'm going to just type in the word creative. And let's say this is super cool and I love it. I'm actually going to duplicate it and just leave it to the side over here. But this one I want outlined. So if I love this, or I might want to change it, I'm not sure, I would always recommend making that duplicate and making sure if you are playing with outline text, you have a live version in the corner set aside. This one we're going to turn into the outline. So how you do that is under the type tool, you have these options. There's literally one button that says create outlines. Once you click that, it instantly converts your live text into an object. So this is considered an object now, which is why you're able to manipulate it a little bit more. And so that makes it super cool. So if I want to make this actually more creative and I want to change the color of this, using my black arrow, if I click on that, I'm going to click on that teal we grabbed earlier, the whole word is going to change that color. But if I want to make it a little bit more fun, I'm going to use the white arrow and select only one letter at a time. Now I can change those colors and make it actually more creative. And it looks a little bit more fun. Now, can you do that with live text? Yes, because using live text, I can change the color. And with the text tool, which I lost, here it is. I can highlight over a letter and I can go in and actually change it, right? But it's a little bit more time consuming since you have to use the text tool to highlight it. And with the outline text, maybe I want to do some more funky things to it. So I want to actually make these letters a little bit more fun and engaging and change some more details with it and kind of just play around with it a little bit more. So that's something you wouldn't be able to do with the live text. Okay. So that is the text tool. And okay, I want to also show, let's see. I'm going to back up and go into the shape builder again and how you use it with the text tool. Okay, I'm gonna make this one color, and having this text outlined, and now I want to add some more like flourishes to the text. So there's a couple different ways we can do that. So we talked about the pen tool. So if I bring that pen tool up, to use the pen tool, I want to make sure that I'm not using a fill for the pen tool, but only a stroke. And now I can zoom in and I can just draw directly some shapes, some designs right along my letters. Now you can use the pen tool any way you want. I recommend you start just kind of playing with straight lines, but then you can start to click and drag and you get this little handle and you're starting to make something called Bezier curves. And so it just makes like super fun, crazy shapes. You can really do whatever you want. And you can leave it as a shape, or you can start to highlight towards the beginning of whatever shape you are making. And what happens is a little circle appears next to the end of your pen tool, and it makes the shape a full, like it contains itself. And so now you can actually make it interior. And you can make a fill inside of this shape. But once you think it's a little funky, that's when you start to use that white arrow. We can go in and start to change some of these little things here. It's like, that's no good. This handle is sticking out. You can actually go back and change handle directions. So it's very fun to play with. And if this is something you want to try and use, you don't need to be an illustrator, you don't need to be the best drawer, but the best way to practice is actually going back and learning your cursive and using the pen tool to play with cursive letters. Just make sure you're actually not using it with a fill, you're using it with a stroke. So playing with cursive letters will make it a fun way for you to practice using the pen tool with straight lines and with curved lines. Delete those. So I'm gonna add a few more shapes before we start to blend things. I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna play with some of those greens. Oops. Go back to my star and add my points. So if I'm on the triangle, if it's a triangle in my star, I'm just using the up arrow to add some more segments to my star here. And when I have a fill on, it's okay. I'm just gonna add some circles. And what happens with, if I want to blend some things together, we talked about the shape builder tool. What happens is if I'm going back to that shape builder tool and I want to combine things after I select them, the color of them is going to change. It's going to pick up whatever color is on the top. So if you want to keep that star a different color, it can't be combined, and there's no reason to combine it. But if here, I want this circle to match with this little wave thing I made, I'm just gonna highlight over it, combine it, and now I know it's all one shape, the circle's blended in, it's all one color, and I probably prefer it that way. So just something to keep it a little bit more contained, and when you want to separate things or when you want to keep things not separated. Another tool that I'm going to bring up really briefly, just because this is going to be a simple one that you can use anytime, is the eraser tool. So now that I have this crazy shape, and maybe I don't want to be as specific with my white arrow to delete like dots here and there, but I kind of want to just go in and erase something, because we've all probably played with some digital program with an eraser before, or just know how to use it based off real life. So it looks like a crazy little eraser, and you can just highlight over what you want and it'll start to delete your little lines. it automatically will fill in the shape for you, and you can kind of draw whatever shape you want. You can also change the size of your eraser by using on your keyboard the open and closed brackets will change the shape of your eraser. And this is the case for a lot of tools in Illustrator, like a brush tool that might need to change the shape. So I can make it really tiny and just change the shape a little bit. Or I can make it really big if I want to delete something a lot bigger and make it not so hard to do. So it's something that you can use anytime. And now that our text is outlined, we can also use the eraser here. So we can just kind of go in. You can erase it in whatever way you want to add to the design. If you want to keep it straight, you always hold down that shift key on your keyboard and make that straight line happen. And it's a really simple way to kind of just get what you need without using too many tools, and it keeps it very clean as well. That is the eraser tool. And before, I want to see if anyone has questions, but now I want to show you just how to save your file. So once you have something open, when you're working with a document, typically it's just going to be untitled until you save it. So the earlier you save it, the better. So you just go to File, Save As is the first thing you're going to do. And I'm going to just click my Downloads folder, and you can type in whatever, like if this is your poster, you type it in, and you have a few options on how you want to save it. But automatically Adobe Illustrator is going to pop up, but sometimes you may like be working with a printer where you just need to send them in a different type of Illustrator file, or maybe you're just making a PDF for someone else to read. So typically if you're playing with this, you just want to make an Illustrator file. But if, let's say you go to the library and you save an Illustrator file, but you don't have Illustrator at home and you can't open it, you would want to save a PDF. So that way you can open your PDF at home. And then you just hit save, and it'll come up with a few options before you actually hit OK. Your options are specifically about the version you're using. So it's automatically going to populate with whatever version you have installed. And it's typically not important for you to save at a lower quality unless you're working specifically with older versions, or you're working with sharing files with other people who can't open it. Or you're trying to collaborate with a different program that can't work with the higher options of Illustrator. So you're just going to leave it at a default. You can also it'll create compatible PDF files. Usually all of this stuff I just leave checked and hit OK, and it'll save for me. And then you can see your top bar. This is a little tab here. You can see it changes my name to poster.ai, so poster.adobe Illustrator. And now my file is actually saved, and I can go back in and open it. So I will show you that. So I'm going to X out of it. So on my main board, on my recent list, I have poster, so I can just click that and open it back up. So just a very good reminder that definitely save your work. Yes, placing a photo, sure. So let's see if I have any available. Okay. So while I'm in here on this blank page, so the best way to place the photo in here is just to go to File, Place, and it's going to come up with your Finder box. And I'm gonna try and place this JPEG in, and just hit place. It's letting me find all readable documents. You can be more specific if you want, but just make sure all readable is selected. And I also would recommend linking it. and I will explain why. But I'm gonna not link it for a moment. I'm gonna hit place, and you can see it's like kind of floating around on my arrow. Once I click it, it'll actually place in place, but it's very large. I'm also very zoomed in. For me to, I'm gonna scale it down. So using the black arrow, I'm just gonna click the corner, hold down shift, and kind of drag it down a little bit. So I'm just clicking and dragging just to make it a little bit smaller. So you can see that this picture is in here. If I click, I think I had it linked. Let's do one of that. No, never mind. I don't want to confuse you. This image, you can see right at the top, it has this like, it's not titled, it's titled with this crazy lettering system from the internet. So if you have a different picture you want to use, you can relink it and click a different picture that you have, and it'll change it for you. So once you save your project, we've already saved it once, so I can just click save, it'll save right over it. But that's how you do that. Oh, I think, did you want to learn how to save the JPEG? Okay, yes. So if I have, I'm actually going to, okay. So if I have, let's see, I'm just gonna delete this. Sorry. So I just have too many artboards on my screen. I just want to play with one. So if I want to save this as a JPEG, instead of just saving it as, you can click export and export as. Export for screens is specifically for that digital and mobile, and so is save for web. So just export as is good, and it'll automate, like you have PNG, and you can scroll down and you can click JPEG. You want PNG if you're going to have that transparent background. So if you're making a logo, definitely use PNG. If you're going to make this into a poster, you can click JPEG, poster, maybe it's ready for print. And I'm going to check mark my artboard, because if I have stuff on the edges that I duplicated and don't want to use, I only want whatever I played with on my canvas to be printed. Then I click export, and I have my JPEG options. So this is important because if I am setting it to print, I want it to be CMYK. And if I'm making it for a digital purpose, I'm gonna change it to RGB. And it's always best typically to leave these things at a higher quality, especially for print. Typically you'll have it lower for web and mobile purposes. And then you'll click OK, and you'll see, should change. It did not change. Oh, that's because it doesn't save it, but it does export it into a poster into your file.
Open any document, select the type tool.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, I accidentally played something. Don't worry about it.
That's okay. Does anyone have any other questions I can answer? Why Illustrator versus InDesign? So Illustrator is going to be specifically for like all of your art creation, your logo design, packaging. Something I did not mention, I apologize, is that because it's a vector-based program, any artwork you create is infinitely scalable, which is super awesome, versus a raster program like Photoshop. It'll lose quality depending on the size you make it. So anytime you see logos and stuff, like any illustrations created, those are made in Illustrator. InDesign is specifically used more as a layout program, so it's strongly used for bookmaking, for magazines, for those like annual yearly books at different companies. The graphics they have in there are made in Illustrator and they work very nicely together, but InDesign is better used for a more type heavy project when it's not experimental. So it's a little bit more of that layout, that document, brochures. That's the reason why you would use that.
Any other? Okay.
Oh no, I was gonna say I do love InDesign though. So if anyone is interested in, if you guys want an intro to that, let us know.
And that's a perfect segue into what I was just going to say. Right after this program, I'll be sending out a survey to everyone to share your feedback, but then to also let us know what future programs you would like to see Creative Experience offer. We'd love to hear what you'd like to see in the space, so please share with us. And thank you so much for joining us. If you have any additional questions for Anna, please let her know.